Hi everybody, in this video I want to give an introduction to every part of the Cambridge exams: the first certificate, the B2, the advanced certificate, the C1, and the proficiency, the C2. Okay, so I want to analyze each section: the use of English, the speaking, the reading, the writing, and the listening. Okay, so I have documents in particular that I want to share, 3 books that are very important, and every time I prepare people for the exam I use these books a lot. Okay, so I'm going to show you the link, and for example you can see the 3 pages here. The middle is for the first certificate, the right is for the advanced, and the left is for the proficiency. So the structure of the books are identical, similar to the exam. So we'll open this. This is for the first certificate, and I'll make my screen a little bit smaller. So basically you type into Google the teacher's handbook. Okay, so the handbook for the teachers for the Cambridge B2, and you will receive this PDF, this book that I recommend to download very urgently, because it's really good. Okay, so it's the same book for the B2, and here we have the C1. Okay, and also we have the proficiency. Exactly the same structure. So there's a handbook for the teacher for each exam, and today I want to explain every part of the exam briefly and very quickly, but very precisely, and we'll start with the B2. Okay, so this is the first certificate exam, and you can see the first pages are just about the exam, information about the exam, nothing really related to the exercises, but it's more about the results and an explanation of the structure of the company and things like that. So this is the content. The first part is the reading and use of English. The second part is the writing. The third part is the listening, and the fourth part is the speaking. Okay, so again, the other books are exactly the same. So I'm going to go first so we continue to the first part, the reading and the use of English. So it's on page, so we'll just continue through the introduction. Here's the first part, reading and use of English. Okay, so page 9, and you can see my notes here. I have all the pages of the appropriate numbers for each section. So for example, page 9 in the book is for the use of English, page 29, etc. Okay, so I'll put my notes here, because if I need to write anything I can put them here. And let me begin to explain the book for the use of English. Okay, so this is the B2. So the first part, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 for the use of English, and everybody remembers the use of English. We have multiple choice for the first part, open close for the second part, and I'm just going to get my color here so you can see. So first 4 are the use of English, multiple choice, open close, the word formation, and the keyword transformation. Okay, so they are the key for the use of English. And then we continue down the page and we go to the reading. So in the first certificate, there are 3 different readings: part 5, part 6, and part 7. And I just want to give you a little introduction. That's 5, 6, 7 for the reading. Multiple choice for the first reading, a gap text for the second reading, and multiple matching for the third reading. So I will show you briefly the texts in this book as well. So that's the marks: 12 marks, 12 marks, and 10 marks. So in total you have 70 marks. Okay, so I'll just clear that. And to compare, I'm going to open the advanced. So here's the advanced, and we're looking for page 9 on the advanced. And you can see the reading and the use of English here for the advanced. You have 1 hour 30 minutes, and I'll make that smaller, sorry, and I'll make this smaller so you can see everything just to compare. So here is the B2, and on the right is the advanced. So I'm going to zoom out and just to compare the two. So you also have 4 use of English in the advanced: 1, 2, 3, 4 use of English. But the difference between the advanced and the first certificate with a reading, you have 1 extra reading in the advanced. Okay, so you have 5, 6, 7, and 8 for the reading. So you have 4 texts in the advanced compared to 3 texts in the first certificate. Okay, and just to look at the proficiency while we are here, And the page for the proficiency for the use of English is page 9. So we'll open the proficiency, and here it is. We go to page 9. We'll zoom out a little so you can see everything. And here we have 7 parts. Okay, so the first 4, exactly the same structure. It's the use of English for the first 4 in the proficiency. And it's part 5, part 6, and part 7 for the reading. So you have multiple choice in the reading, gap text. So the structures are exactly the same. Just the quality of the questions are probably different. So the questions are probably more difficult in the proficiency compared to the advanced, and the questions in the reading in the advanced are probably more difficult compared to the first certificate. Okay, so you can see the scores in total for the proficiency. It's 72 in total. Okay, and then for the advanced, the total is 78 in the reading and use of English, and in the first certificate the total is 70. Okay, so quite similar, very, very similar. So this is the first certificate, and we'll just continue because I want to show you this book. Okay, so here is an explanation of each section in detail, and it's a good idea to read this book when you're preparing for the exam. Okay, so in particular, each part in this page, part 4, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, and then we continue. And they give you preparation advice in particular. So preparation in general, to prepare, basically you should read as much as possible, read a variety of books, magazines, different sources to improve and to be familiar with different structures. And we go further, and they give you specific advice to prepare for each part. So this is part 1, the multiple choice for the use of English. This is the official Cambridge advice to prepare you. So it's a very good document for you to check for part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 were the sentences in the use of English. So if you need help and advice, I recommend that you read this section in particular for part 4. Part 5 will be the reading advice, how to prepare for part 5, etc. Part 6 and part 7. Okay, so it's a fantastic book, but also they have examples. So here they have a full test. So I'm going to turn clockwise so you can see they have part 1, multiple choice, use of English. Part 2 on the left, it's an article with the space, that's the open close. So it's necessary to select the correct word in your mind. You have no options. Part 3 is the word formation, where you need to change the word from a verb to an adjective to a noun or an adverb. And part 4 is normally very difficult for a lot of people. It's the sentence. You have one sentence and it's necessary to rewrite the second sentence with the same significance as the first sentence, but with different words. And it's necessary to use the word they give. Okay, and you have between 2 and 5 words. So you need to write between 2 and 5 of your own words to have the second sentence with the same significance. Okay, so very interesting. Now remember, the advanced is exactly the same and the proficiency is exactly the same structure. Okay, so part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 of the use of English are exactly the same. Yes, the quality of the grammar and the quality of the vocabulary will be more difficult as you grow, as you increase to be the advanced and the proficiency, of course. But the structure is very good, is very similar, so that's quite good. Part 5 is the first reading in the first certificate, so it's a text and multiple choice questions, but you need to be very clear with the question, and you need to be very clear with the difference between A, B, C, and D, because normally it's very, very tricky, and there's a possibility for every answer, but there's a reason for every correct answer, so you need to be very careful. Okay, and in some of my videos before, we have seen some exercises, and I will continue to make more exercises also. Part 6 in the first certificate, you have a paragraph and you have a space in the position of the paragraph, and it's necessary for you to enter the correct letter into the correct number. So it's very, very interesting, and this is difficult. So you need to be careful for the sentence before, pay attention to the context for the sentence before, pay attention to the link and the content of the paragraph, and try your best to put into the correct number. It's a very difficult exercise, and in the previous pages they give you the particular advice if you want to prepare. But I will also do some videos and make some videos to do some of these exercises, okay? Again, part 7 of the first certificate, you have 4 paragraphs, 4 different sections, A, B, C, and D, and it's necessary to answer the question in relation and put the letter, the appropriate letter, A, B, C, or D. And I think you can choose more than once. So for example, 43, it's possible A and D. 46 is possible B and C. It's possible 2 times, okay? So let's look at that's part 7, and that's the end of the reading and the use of English for the first certificate. And there you have the answers in the book, but they also give you another full test, okay? So very, very interesting book. This is the page that you write on in the exam, so you're familiar. And just to compare the other one, this is the advanced, okay? So exactly the same book structure, explanation of the exercise, preparation in general, advice, and then specific preparation, specific advice for part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 of the use of English, and then the 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the reading. So a very good book. And again, here we have a test, okay, a full test. So you can see exactly the same structure. Part 1, the vocabulary and the fluency is probably a bit higher, so the test is more difficult. But part 2 is the same on the left. You have no options, and it's necessary to put the correct word from your vocabulary, from your range. And on the right, it's the same, the word formation. You need to change the word on the right to the correct and appropriate word for the answer. And part 4 is exactly the same as the B2. The sentence, the first sentence, it's necessary to write the second sentence with the same significance as the first sentence, and it's necessary to use the word they give. Here, it's between 3 and 6 words. So the first certificate, it's between 2 and 5, but the advanced is between 3 and 6, and that's a big difference, okay? So that's part 4. Now we go to the reading of the advanced, exactly the same. So you have a long text, very difficult vocabulary, very, very difficult vocabulary, but it's not necessary to understand every word. Your job is really to identify the correct answer. And here are the options again. The same advice for the first certificate. The options are very similar, and they're very tricky exercise. Personally, I have a lot of difficulty even in English to do these myself. They're very, very hard in my opinion. Some people are very good at the reading, other people have difficulty. This is part 6. So you have 4 paragraphs in the advanced for part 6, and you have questions on the right, and it's necessary to put the correct letter with the correct option. And I think the reviews may be chosen more than once. So for example, it could be 37A, 38A, 39C, 40C. So it's possible that B and D are not used, so you have to be aware and careful of that. So a little different from the first certificate. And again, the vocabulary will be very good. This is part 7. So you have a text on the left, and you have paragraphs here as well on the right. Similar to the first certificate, you need to connect the appropriate paragraph into the appropriate position in the text. So the secret here is the sentence before the gap and the sentence after the gap. So you need to use your logic and to try and connect the two paragraphs cohesively and fluently. Very, very difficult, and especially at the advanced level, the vocabulary is tricky, okay? Part 8 is the final part of the reading in the advanced. So you have one extra part compared to the first certificate. And here you have the statement. So you have a statement, like a sentence, sentence, and you need to match the sentence to the appropriate option. So you have consultant A, consultant B, consultant C. So you need to enter the correct letter into the appropriate sentence. So difficult, and remember that the answers can be chosen more than once. The same as part 7 and part 6, that it's possible to have 47A, 48A, okay? And you need to be aware of that possibility. So that is the reading and the use of English for the advanced. And there's the answers in this book. And then also the book is very good because you have a second exam, a second full exam similar to the first book, okay? That's the page that you write on. And just to show you for the proficiency, while we are here, so this is the beginning of the use of English and the reading. And we'll move down here and I'll move my screen so you can see a bit better. So exactly the same explanation of part 1 from Cambridge, explanation of part 2, etc. Part 3, part 4, part 5, a specific explanation. So really, before you study for this exam, before you do this exam, I totally recommend that you read this book, okay? Depending on the parts that you want to analyze. It's about 90 pages. And then again, here we have general preparation for the proficiency, use of English and reading, general advice and general tips, and specifically for part 1, the best advice and the best tips to prepare for part 1 of the use of English. All the parts 2, 3, 4, 5 is the reading, 6 is the reading, and 7 is another reading. Okay, so really good book, really good advice. And again, the same structure in this book, we have a full test. So this is the use of English, part 1, 8 options. I think in the first certificate we have 6 options, but here we have 8 options and the vocabulary will be very difficult. Number 2, part 2 is the same. Open, close is the technical name. Part 3 is the word formation. And part 4 are the sentences of the proficiency. Okay, and here you use between 3 and 8. So that's the big difference between the advanced, the first certificate, and the proficiency in relation to the sentences. Okay, then you have part 5. So for the proficiency, it's exactly the same. The structure, the type of the task is the same. It's multiple choice and exactly the same advice for every part of, if it's the first, the advanced, or proficiency, it's exactly the same advice. Okay, and in part 6, you have paragraphs on the right, and it's necessary again to put in the correct location of the real text. So it could be a little word that gives you a clue, it could be a preposition, it could be the context of the sentence. So you need to be careful, but in relation to time, it's a big pressure as well. So you need maybe 11, 12 minutes on average for every part. So you don't have a lot of time. So you need to prepare to do these exercises in a short time. So you need to read quickly, confidently, skim reading, okay? So that is part 6. Part 7 is similar again. So you have a statement, opinion, different opinions, and you need to match the opinion with the correct paragraph. And you have 4 paragraphs, and each may be chosen more than once. So you can have 41A, 47A, 50A, okay? So similar, very, very similar. You have the answers, and then you have another then you have only one full test example in the proficiency handbook. And this is the page that you write on. Good, so let's go back to the first certificate and we can continue to the writing. So I'm going to return the page, and here we have the writing. So in the first certificate, you have 2 parts, 1 hour, 20 minutes. Part 1 is an essay, it's compulsory. So in the first certificate, it's compulsory essay, 140 to 190 words. And part 2 is one task from an option. So it's possible an article, it's possible informal email, it's possible a letter, a formal email or a formal letter, a report or a review. So the style of the writing is very different, and the style of the different tasks are the most obvious difference between the first and the advanced. Part 1 and part 2 of the writing. Okay, so there's 40 marks. So that is part 1 and part 2. Again, exactly the same. You have an explanation of each part, and then you have preparation from Cambridge, advice, how to prepare for the writing in general, and specific advice, how to prepare for part 1 for the essay for the first certificate, and specifically how to prepare the advice for part 2 of the first, okay? And here is an excellent page because they explain the detail of an article. What exactly is an article? What is required in an article? The same with an email. What exactly is an email? What do you have to do? Okay, an essay, a report, and a review. A very, very good page for the first certificate. And I think it's the same in the other books. Okay, so this is part, this is a sample example. On the left, you have the essay, and on the right, you have the option between a review, article, and email. Okay, and here is another very valuable page for this book. So this is information about the assessment, the examiner, what they look for and what they want you to write. Okay, so basically there's 4 areas in the writing. You have content, so I'll make this bigger. There's 4 important areas in the writing. This is the same for the first, it's the same for the advanced, and it's the same for the proficiency. And it's almost the same for the IELTS as well. All exams in English with writing have a very similar requirement for your quality of writing. Content, basically you have to answer the question. Okay, so in the essay, you have maybe 2 or 3 parts. So your answer, it's necessary to have 2 or 3 parts. Very important, the content. Communicative achievement means, is it formal? Is it appropriate? So the question maybe requires you to be formal. Is your answer formal? Okay, is it informal? The register, that's the tone, or sorry, the formality or informality. Organization, that's quite logical. In an essay, you need an introduction, the first point, the second point, the third point, conclusion. Is it organized? Also, in relation to organization, you need the cohesive devices. Cohesive devices are another term for linkers. However, furthermore, although, as well as that, those linkers are very important in this section for the organization, for your mark. And then finally, the language. So vocabulary, you need a range and a variety of vocabulary, and the same with grammar. You need a range and a variety with grammar as well. For example, a mix of the passive, conditional, perfect. These are the most important things in this section for your writing, for the language, okay? And the top mark is 5. So the maximum mark you can get in each section is 5. Okay, so that's for the first certificate. And here's a better explanation of the marks. Okay, so here's the same communicative achievement, organization, language, and content is above. So that's for the C2, that's for the C1, that's what's required for the B2, the B1, A2. Okay, but specifically for this book, it's the B2. And for content, if you want a mark 5, you need to do this. For communicative achievement, if you want a mark 5, you need to meet this requirement. You need to be close to what they expect here. The same with organization and the same with language. Okay, and the reason for a low mark is here. So very interesting book, and really it's all the answers that you need before you do the exam. Then we have a glossary. So that's just an explanation of each technical vocabulary. So there's technical words, and that's an explanation of the technical vocabulary in the B2. Okay, and there's a sample writings. So they give you a few samples and they give you the comments of the examiner. Very interesting. So they have a lot. So I'll just continue to the next section. And there's the second example, the second test to practice. So you have the essay on the left, and on the right in this exam, you have an option between report, article, and review. Okay, so really good book, really, really excellent. And let's go to the next section. Another sample, more sample of writings. We continue. And I just want to go to the next part. There's the page that you write in the exam. And we should move to the next part now. Okay, so that's the end of the writing for the first certificate. Now let's analyze the writing in the advanced for there's the proficiency, but we want to go to the advanced for the writing. Here's the advanced book, and we're at the end of the use of English. So I'm going to move it so you can see. So this is the advanced. The difference, you have 1 hour 30 minutes. So you have an extra 10 minutes. And you have to write more words. So in the advanced, it's between 220 and 260 words. Task 1 is the essay, and task 2 is an option between a letter, email, proposal, report, or review. And the letter or the email could be informal or formal. So you need to be careful in every part if it's formal or informal. So that's the writing, very, very similar. And this book you will see is identical. So the next page is explanation of each part and also preparation, advice to prepare. Okay, and specific advice to prepare for part 1 of the writing from Cambridge and part 2. Okay, then we have, similar to the B2, an explanation of an essay. What exactly is an essay in the C1 advanced? A letter. What exactly is a letter? What are the details that you have to do? And this is advice on the right, preparation, how to prepare for an essay, how to prepare for a letter, how to prepare for a proposal, a report. What exactly is a report? What exactly is a proposal? Okay, and a review. So for me, this page is maybe the most important because the majority of students always ask, what's the difference between a review, a report, a proposal? They don't know. So this page is so important and it's so valuable. Okay, so I recommend that you check this page if you're doing the exam. So that's for the advanced. Then you have an example. So you have the essay on the left, a little different structure, and the options on the right. Okay, and you need to read the question so carefully to really understand the detail. And we go down to the next part. Yeah, I think it's the assessment. So I'll rotate. Okay, so this is exactly the same as the previous first certificate. On the left, you have the 4 areas: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. So if you want a 5 in content, that's what you need. If you get a low mark, that's the reason your essay is low. And the next page is identical to the first certificate. This is the advanced, what's required for the communicative achievement, organization, and language. For the proficiency, the advanced, the first, and the B1. Okay, and the next page is specific for the advanced, what you need for the advanced in content, communicate. Okay, so you understand, I think. Very good book. And there's an explanation of the technical vocabulary. If you have any doubts with the technical lingo, the technical words, I recommend that you read that page. And here we have samples. So you have samples, and a reason why, explanation why it's good mark or a bad mark. Here we have a second exam. So there's 2 full sample tests, and we have examples. Okay, and there's the pages that you write, and that's it. Okay, so really interesting. For the advanced and the proficiency, you will see is exactly the same. So this was the end, and we'll just show you here the proficiency. It's 1 hour 30 minutes also, and you have 2 tasks. First one is an essay. The words are a little more, so it's 240 and 280 in between. And the same with the second part, it's more words, 280 between 320. That's the big difference. And it could be an article, it could be an informal letter, a formal letter, a report, or review. So the styles are almost the same, but you're required to write more and you're required to write to a better level. Okay, so you'll see here's the same, an explanation of each part and general advice how to prepare, and general advice how to prepare specifically for part 1 and part 2 of the writing. This is an explanation at the proficiency. What is an article? What you need to do for an article. An essay, what you need to do. A letter, a report, and advice for preparation. Very, very good book because it's officially from Cambridge, and they're the people who are answering or correcting your work. And there's an example here. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit different compared to the other. There's more detail and more information. So on the left you have an essay, and on the right you have to the option between a review, a report, an article, and another essay they have. Okay, so really it's evaluation. You need to evaluate the key points of the both texts, and you need to use your own words, of course. Okay, so we can talk later about specifically the writing, but I just want to show you an introduction today. And here, similar to the first certificate and the advanced, it's the assessment. So again, for the writing, the content, communicative achievement, organization, language. So they're the 4 areas in the writings that are necessary. So important. Content, if you want the 5, that's what's necessary. And exactly the same, that's an explanation of what's required. Okay, same as the previous advanced and the first certificate. And that's specifically here for the proficiency. Okay. And that's the explanation of the technical vocabulary. So that's the writing for the first, the writing for the advanced, and the writing for the proficiency. They are examples here. They show you example and the comments of the examiner and the score. So we have many, many examples, which is a good book. And we finish the writing there. So it's use of English and reading and writing complete. First certificate, advanced, and proficiency. Now we will look at the first certificate and we will look at the listening. Okay, so in the listening for the first certificate, 40 minutes approximately. And you have 4 parts. Okay, part 1 is multiple choice. Part 2 is sentence completion. Part 3 is multiple matching. And part 4 is multiple choice, and a total of 30 marks. For the advanced, okay, so for the advanced here, for the listening, you have 40 minutes, okay, same again, and you have 4 parts, again, 30 marks, multiple choice, sentence completion, multiple choice, and multiple matching. So very, very, very similar. And the proficiency for the listening, you have 40 minutes approximately, and you have 4 parts, 30 marks also, and 3 option multiple choice, sentence completion, multiple choice with 4 options, and multiple matching. So the structures are almost identical, but the content of the listening will be different, and the difficulty of the questions will also be difficult and different. Okay, so this is the proficiency. We go back to the first certificate just to explain the book, and here's the book. Okay, so explanation of each part, specific explanation, preparation, specific preparation, advice for the listening in general, and then the next part is particularly for each part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Okay, really good advice, and if you have doubts for the listening, I recommend that you check there. So this is the structure of the exam. There's part 1. You have a question, multiple choice, question, multiple choice, question, multiple choice, 8 questions. Part 2, you remember, you have a sentence, and it's necessary to catch the correct word and the appropriate word from the audio. Okay, so a little bit difficult, but a very interesting style. Part 3, you have speaker 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you need to enter the correct letter for each speaker. Okay, so here the difference, you use the letter only once. Okay, so you use the letter only once compared to the reading, so that's the difference. And there's 3 extra letters which you do not need. So 3 letters are not required. So you need to choose one letter, each letter once. Okay, so that's part 3 of the listening in the first certificate. And here's part 4 of the listening, again, multiple choice. Okay, and I think it's a monologue. Oh no, this one's an interview. Okay, so part 4 is an interview with a woman in this case. So again, multiple choice, and you need to be very careful because the 3 options are very similar and very tricky, very, very difficult. And in this book, they show you the script. So here's the transcript for the audio. Okay, very valuable, very interesting. Transcript, 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 and the assessment, the answers. So there's no content. It's very clear. The answer is yes or the answer is no for the listening. And here's a second example, a second exam to practice, part 2, part 3, and part 4, and the script. Okay, so this is the first certificate, and that's the assessment, and that's the end of the listening. There's the page that you write on, and that's the end of the listening for the first certificate. And now we move to the advanced, and it'll be almost identical. Explanation of each part in detail, preparation from Cambridge in general, how to prepare for the listening, preparation in general for part 1, specific advice to prepare for part 2, part 3, and part 4, and then we have the samples. Okay, so there's part 1, multiple choice. Okay, extract 1, extract 2, extract 3, and multiple choice, ABC, ABC. Okay, and part 2 is the same. You have a sentence and you need to enter the correct word. And part 3 is multiple choice, so a little different. It's multiple choice, so it's not too dramatic, but you have 4 options in the advanced, A, B, C, and D. So very, very tricky for the reason of the questions. You need to understand so clearly the questions. Really, that's the secret. But we will talk later about more specific preparation for the listening. And this is part 4 in the advanced. And this is problematic for a lot of people as well. So you have task 1 on the left and task 2 on the right. So you have speaker 1, the same speaker, speaker 2, the same, but you have different options in task 1 and different options in task 2. So you need to answer a lot of questions, really. Very hard, but the only way is to practice and to be familiar with the structure. Okay, so that's part 4. And I think that's the end of the listening. There's the script, the transcript, and the answers, and another test, I think, another test and another script. So that's the reason this book is excellent, in my opinion. Really, really valuable, really, really interesting. And there's the sheet that you write on, and that's the end of the listening for the advanced. And the proficiency is, I think, almost identical again. Explanation of each part in detail, advice to prepare in general, advice specific to prepare for each part, and an exam, a sample exam for the proficiency. So multiple choice, exactly the same. Part 2 is exactly the same, a sentence, but of course the vocabulary is going to be different, and the level is going to be higher. And then part 3 is multiple choice there as well, with the questions A, B, and C, and D. And then that's the end of part 3. And then the final part is part 4, where you have the same as the advanced. And I'll just turn it so it's task 1 and task 2. And you have the speaker here, speaker 1, speaker 2 on the left, and you need to identify the correct letter. Okay. And that's the end of the proficiency. And there's the script, tape script for the proficiency. So the same structure as the advanced and the first certificate, the answers. And I think there's only one sample exam in this book. And the next part is the speaking. So we'll go to the first certificate book here, and we'll start with the speaking. And it's 14 minutes only, and a little introduction. So there's 4 parts in the first certificate. The first part is 2 minutes. It's a conversation between you and the partner, and it's a general questions. So general questions about family, about yourself, social language. That's the term they say. Part 2 are the pictures. So in the first certificate, you have 1 minute to answer a question in relation to 2 pictures. And after the 1 minute, you have 30 seconds to answer a question on your partner's picture. Okay, so that's just an explanation. And part 3, you have a 2-minute discussion, and a 2-minute discussion followed by a 1-minute task, and in total it's 4 minutes. Okay, and there's part 4. It is longer, a discussion on related topics. So that's the first certificate. I'll show you the full example here. So this is the same structure. It's an explanation of each part and specific advice to prepare in general for the speaking, and then specific advice to prepare for each part in particular. And here is the sample. So this is the first part. It is where are you from, your likes, your dislikes, special occasions, the media. I'll just zoom in a little if you cannot see it. And then part 2, you have the introduction, and they give you the pictures, and they ask you one question in relation to the pictures, and then you have 1 minute to compare and answer the question. So really you need to make a comparison between the 2 pictures, but focus on the answer. And later we will explain a video about the speaking in particular, but that's part 2. And then after you give your answer for 1 minute, your partner has a separate answer to give for 30 seconds. Okay, and then after that, your partner has his or her own pictures for 1 minute, and you have to give a 30-second answer after he or she is finished. Okay, that's part 2. And I'll show you the pictures at the end here as well. So here are the pictures on the left. So you can see the question is at the top here. How important is it to help people in these situations? So you need to compare the 2 and really focus on the question about how important is it to help. So for example, the first picture, it's very important because he has a physical injury and he might need to go to the hospital. However, like a linker in the second photograph, it does not seem as important as the first picture. However, I could be wrong, because maybe she's looking for her child or she's looking for something important. Okay, so it's speculation and focusing on the question. And there's the second pictures for the second candidate. That's part 2. And then part 3, you have this diagram on the right. So this is the diagram for part 3. You have a question. You have 15 seconds to look at the question, and then you have to have a discussion for 2 minutes with your partner. So it's about interaction, how you interact with the answer from your partner, how you develop the conversation, and everything has to have a good flow, and it's an interesting activity. So that's part 3. And at the end, you have 1 minute to make a final answer. For example, which one is the most important? Okay, so that's part 3. And then part 4 is related to the topic in part 3. And I'll just turn it again. So part 4 is related, here it is at the bottom, more questions in relation to part 3. And it could be direct question, it could be an open question, it depends on the examiner or the interlocutor. Okay, good. And there's a second exam, so a second sample, second pictures, part 2, part 3, and part 3, and part 4. Okay, so that's the first certificate. For me, this page is similar with the assessment. So there are 4 areas. You remember the writing. You had an assessment for the writing: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. In the writing, grammar, vocabulary, discourse management, pronunciation, and interactive communication. So they're the 4 areas for the speaking, the assessment. So for me, this page is the most important for the examiner and for the student who wants to know exactly what's required for the listening exam. Sorry, for the speaking. Okay. And there's exactly the same. So for the B2, if you want the top mark, this is what's required. In the grammar, the discourse management is like organization, the pronunciation, and their interaction. So if you want the best mark 5, you need to do this. So it's definitely worth reading this page and this book for sure. And this is more here. This is the same. This is a proficiency, advanced, and B2, just to compare the different levels. And there's an explanation of all the technical vocabulary. Okay, discourse management, what does it mean specifically here? So you have to really understand that. And if you understand this page clearly, you have a great chance of preparing well and doing well in the exam. And then that's the same explanation. And that's the page you use in the exam. And that's the end of the book. So a really, really good book for the first certificate. So I'll close that. And now this is the advanced. We go to the advanced speaking. And you will find it's almost identical, 15 minutes. There's 4 parts, okay? The first part is a conversation, introduction. Second part, you have the pictures, a little different. Part 4 is a 2-way conversation, again, a discussion, similar to part 3. And part 5 is a further discussion, a little more time than the first certificate. Okay, so here's an explanation of each part. Part 1 in detail, preparation, specific advice in general to prepare for the speaking. And then specific advice to prepare for the speaking for part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. And then we have the exam. Okay, so this is the part 1 on the left. Where are you from? What do you do in your free time? General questions. Part 2 are the pictures, introduction to the pictures, and a question for the pictures, 1-minute answer. And then a 30-second question for your partner, and vice versa. And here are the pictures, okay? So in the advanced, you have 3 pictures. In the first certificate, you have 2 pictures, and in the advanced, you have 3. But it's necessary only to choose 2 in the advanced. So you're given 3, but you need to select 2 and speak about 2, okay? And also you have 2 questions. So it's a little bit more complicated, and it's a little bit more attention that is required. Okay, so that is the advanced speaking part 2, and this is part 3, almost identical. It's a discussion with you and your partner. And then part 4 is more conversation, more discussion in relation to the topic from part 4. So really good. And there's a second exam, part 1, part 2, part 3, a second exam, and part 4. And this is exactly the same as the other book. It is the assessment. So remember, you have grammar, grammatical resource, lexical resource, discourse management, pronunciation, and interactive communication. And here's the book for the advanced. For the top mark 5 in each category, this is what you need to do: pronunciation, discourse management, lexical resource, grammatical resource, and interactive communication. So very, very valuable page for information, very specific. And this is just, I think, more specifically for the proficiency, for the advanced, a comparison of all the different levels, the B2 and the B1. And then this is the explanation of the technical terms: discourse management, grammar, vocabulary, what specifically do they mean? So very important for sure. And that's the end of the book. So that's the end of the advanced and the first certificate. And now I will just do finally the proficiency, which is probably a little bit different. You have 3 parts in the proficiency, okay? So it's different from the first certificate and the advanced. Part 1, you have 2 minutes. It's the same conversation between each candidate. The part 2 is 4 minutes, but the difference is part 3 is 10 minutes. So at part 3, an individual long turn from each candidate, followed by a discussion on the topics. Okay, so I'll just show you an example of the proficiency. But again, this is the same. This is an explanation of each part in detail, and then an explanation of preparation, advice to prepare in general, and advice to prepare specifically for part 1, part 2, and part 3. And here's an example of the exam. Part 1, how are you? Where are you from? What do you like to do in your free time? How difficult is it to learn English? And then part 2, you have pictures again. So I'll show you the pictures for part 2. Different format. So you have 4 pictures. And the instruction here, I'd like you to look at the pictures and talk together about which pictures interest you first, or which pictures interest you more. So a discussion together for about 1 minute, and just to give a general answer about which picture interests you and why. Okay, and then a second part, look at the pictures. I'd like you to imagine that a magazine is planning an article. So you need to talk together about positive and negative aspects of taking risks in this particular answer. And you have 4 minutes, 3 minutes in this, 4 minutes for a group of 3. And that's it. So it's good debate, really. It's debate and discussion. That's the test. And that's another test, part 1 on the left, part 2. And then the assessment is identical. So grammatical resource, lexical resource, discourse management, pronunciation, and interactive communication. Again, identical, very important. And they give you here the page that you use in the exam. And then that's specific for the proficiency. What's required for the top mark in the proficiency for grammar, vocabulary, the organization, the pronunciation, and your interaction with the partner. And that's the end. So the same here. This is a comparison between the proficiency, the advanced, and the first certificate. And then the explanation of the grammatical terms. Okay, the technical terms are explained. Very, very important to read. And that's the overview of the exams. So they're the Cambridge exams. Quite difficult for sure, but very, very interesting to be very clear with every part of the exam. I hope this video helped. I will prepare some material soon for every part to try and help specifically with each exercise. And if you have any questions, please get in contact and you can leave a comment on the video. And I hope that you have a great day and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much and bye-bye.